Other thing that I mentioned earlier is that there are 64 gates that correspond to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, and that each of these gates has 6 lines or 6 potential expressions of energy. So I sometimes like to think of it as a shower head. And so then you have the energy of the gate streaming through the shower head. And then you have these 6 different settings. The shower head, you can turn it and it's like a spray, and then it vibrates. And then, so there are these 6 different ways that same energy of that gate can be expressed. And so this is another level, another layer of the uniqueness that is expressed in the body graph. You'll see that, so it's like if we could imagine, first and foremost, that the Earth is at the center here, and that these gates exist around the Earth. So the neutrinos are streaming in from all directions from outer space. They're passing through the planets in our solar system, and they're coming in, they're activating a gate and a line, and then that gate is translated onto one of the centers of the body graph. Okay, so we see here, let's see if I can make it any bigger. If we look here, hexagram 1, it's also known as gate 1. It's activated by the neutrino stream of the moon at the time of this person's birth, since it's in black. And it gets translated over here onto this center. Gate 1 lives on the G center in the body graph. Now, we don't see the line value in this particular image here, but that's what's happening, is that these gates, the neutrino stream programs the gates, and that information gets transferred onto one of the centers of the body graph. Each of those gates or hexagrams can be expressed in one of these 6 ways. The bottom 3 are the lower trigram. It's all about the self, the individual. The top 3 are the upper trigram, and it's all about other, about reaching across this divide here to connect with the other in one way or another. And so each of these 6 lines has a keynote, it has a theme. In the lower trigram, we have lines 1, 2, and 3. With line 1, always, every hexagram, the first line is going to express the energy of the investigator, which is also about the foundation, introspection. There's a chameleon-like nature here because the foundation is always having to learn more in order to retain its sense of security. So there's also a keynote of security or insecurity that goes along with this first line. And there's empathy, because the investigator really has to get down to the nuts and bolts and understand something very deeply before they can even feel secure in themselves. The second line is the hermit. The hermit doesn't need to know about the investigator or the foundation. The hermit is a natural. So the hermit sort of sits on top of the foundation. It sort of dances on top of the foundation, and it uses what it naturally recognizes works about the foundation. The second line is about absorption. So rather than the investigator that's studying and really wanting to know all the details of the system and exactly how things go together, this is the mathematician that wants to, check every step of the work. The hermit just wants to know E equals mc squared. Okay, how do I use that? They don't want to go back and do all the calculations that led up to knowing that E equals mc squared. If that makes any sense. So the hermit is the natural. The hermit gets projected onto because there's a sort of natural brilliance that emerges from the hermit, and when others see it, they project onto that energy sometimes what they think they want or what they think that hermit is about, and it may or may not be true. The hermit is also the Democrat. They just want to have things be fair. The third line, which is the last of the lower trigram, is always going to be the martyr. And it's called that because the martyr learns through trial and error. The trial and error leads to a mutation of what the martyr knows about itself. And that allows it to be very adaptable, but not before it's gone through this experience of trial and error, which can lead to a feeling of shame. And it's that shame that leads the third line to feel as though they're a martyr. They're always bumping up against things and learning through this trial and error can be a very painful and also a very public experience. Other people are aware, they witness you bumping into things. And so there's shame associated with it. If you feel like you're being burned at the stake, learning these lessons that allow for mutation and adaptation, third lines always become very, very wise over time, because every time that they go into a trial and error process and they learn what doesn't work, they also learn plenty about what does work. So you'll see in your body graph that you have a combination of these different 6 line values associated with the gates that are active in your body graph, and that makes you unique. So this is seen, this moving from the lower to the upper trigram is seen as moving across this divide. So the third line is starting through this trial and error process to become aware that there is actually an other out there. This is all internal process. This is all about the self. But this trial and error process does start to reach across, and then the fourth line becomes the opportunist. Each of these is seen as building on the other. So the 2 contains the 1, the 3 contains the 1 and the 2, the 4 is now standing on a foundation that is made up of the 1, the 2, and the 3. And it's an opportunist in the sense that it wants to externalize the wisdom that has come from the first 3 lines. It wants to externalize the foundation and these the natural brilliance and the learnings through trial and error. And because it wants to externalize, it wants to reach out to others, it wants to make friends. It also wants to abdicate or create peace and, not cause trouble. Oh, it's okay, we can do it the way you want to or not, because it's through the friendliness of the fourth line that they get the opportunities to externalize and influence, is the other keynote, another keynote that goes along with this fourth line, that they get to externalize their influence and actually have their wisdom be shared with another. The fifth line is called the heretic. The heretic is another projection field. It's one of the reasons it's called a heretic, is because just like this hermit gets projected on, people think they see into what that hermit is about, may or may not be true. People project onto this type of energy that the hermit or the heretic represents. And what they project onto this heretic is usually that either they have a truth that's here to save them, or they have a truth that is some sort of blasphemy. The truth that the heretic is here to share is a universal truth. It's meant to apply to everyone, and it's meant to bring solutions and solve problems and help people. So the projection field can be really intense for someone with a lot of fifth lines or with a fifth line personality or a body. And we'll look a little bit at that in an individual design, but a reading. But you'll see that most of us have some type of fifth line somewhere in our design, and it's a place where we can sometimes feel that we're being seen as a threat. The heretic is also the general universalizing things that are generalized for all of humanity. Now, the sixth line is seen as the culmination of the hexagram. So it contains the wisdom that is learned from all of the other lines. And it's a role model, administrator, optimist, and peacemaker because it's gleaned wisdom. Now, there's something to know about the sixth line because it has a very specific life path. The sixth line, everywhere that you see a sixth line or a 6 after the hexagram number on a body graph, you'll know that the energy represented by this hexagram and in this person's design has gone through a 3-phase process of life. The first phase goes from about the age of 0 to 30. And in that phase of life, the 6 identifies as a 3 and it behaves as a 3. So for about 30 years, give or take, of this person with a 6 somewhere in their body graph, most of us have 1 6 or at least 1 6 in our design somewhere. It's possible not to have any, but you might have a 6 somewhere in your body graph that you want to look at. Because for the first 30 years of your life, you would have noticed yourself behaving like a martyr, bumping into things, learning through trial and error, feeling some shame, but also learning through experience and adaptation. And when there's a third line, there's a willingness to engage in this process. Third lines, they sort of shrink from the shame, but there's a part of them that really wants to get in there into the trial and error process and get their hands dirty and try things out, experiment with things. After the age of 30, from the age of 30 to 50, early 50s, specifically the Chiron return, when that energy of Chiron circles back around to where it was when the person was born, this sixth line is like they come up onto the roof and they sit. They don't want to engage in this trial and error process anymore. Something about it doesn't feel good anymore, so they become aloof and they are metaphorically sitting on top. It's like the roof of this structure, and they're watching the world go by. And instead of learning from being in there from trial and error, they're watching and they're, holding in their consciousness what they did learn from the trial and error. And they're watching other people's experiences. And I remember that. Oh, yeah, don't like that. That was all right, but I don't want that now. And so they're digesting and they're processing and they're kind of healing some of the wounds and the bumps and bruises that might have come from this third line process from the ages of 0 to about 30. And so they're sitting up here on this roof, being aloof from the process until the Chiron return in their early 50s. And then again, metaphorically, it's like they come down off of the roof, they re-engage with the community, with the village, with society, and now they get to be the role model. They learned through a bunch of trial and error. They took themselves back and they learned from their experiences and their wisdom, and now they get to share. They get to see the big picture. And so they have optimism because they know that there are processes that sometimes take time to unfold, and just wait it out, you'll get there. And they're the peacemaker because they've resolved a lot of the conflict that came from the internal trial and error in them. And so again, this is another level of the uniqueness that is shown to us in our human design body graph. Each of those hexagrams, every single one, has these 6 lines. And by the way, they are either yin or yang, yang being a straight line, yin being a dashed line. And so again, this is representing the energy, the nature of the energy. In each of these hexagrams, they're going to have a combination of yin and yang and these different line values. So you might have a similar hexagram or gate in a similar planetary position, but have it activated in a totally different line value, and you'll express it differently than the person next to you.